I exposed my cheating fiancé in front of all our friends, weeks before our wedding. I remember the first day I met Ava as if it were a scene playing out under warm, golden lighting. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the sky tinted by dusty pinks, and I was standing in line at a little coffee shop near campus, anxious about an upcoming interview for a teaching assistant position. She stepped in, wearing a yellow scarf and an apologetic grin that lit up her face. She bumped my shoulder while trying to squeeze through the queue. We shared one of those awkward, fleeting glances that linger longer than they should, and from that moment, I felt an inexplicable pull. She apologized, something about being late for class, and I ended up buying her the latte she tried to pay for because she couldn't fish out her wallet quickly enough. By the time I made it to my interview, I had a phone number scrawled on a napkin, a flutter in my chest, and a half-baked idea that my life might have just changed in the space of 10 minutes. We began dating soon after, pacing the campus together at odd hours, finding ourselves tangled in debate about random documentaries, reading side by side in the library's quiet corners, or exploring the sleepy side streets of our college town. My friends teased me for being hopelessly smitten, but for the first time, I had no desire to hide it. Ava was warm, curious, and fiercely driven. She had a passion for social work and was volunteering at a local shelter. I love that compassion in her. I love how she would set everything aside to help a friend in need, or how she never missed a shift at the shelter even when she was overwhelmed by coursework. 4 years later, after both of us had graduated, we'd moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. A year after that, I knelt on one knee with sweaty palms, on the same sidewalk outside the same coffee shop, and asked her to spend forever with me. Ava said yes without hesitation, tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks. We held each other under the canopy of that crisp autumn sky, by then tinted with the soft pinks of dusk. I think about that moment often, especially now, after everything that has transpired. The memory feels as though it belongs to someone else. But I cling to it as a testament to how genuine everything once felt, how sure I was of a happy future with her. Sometimes, though, the bedrock of your life shifts in ways you can't anticipate. We got engaged in the spring, and the wedding date was set for the following winter. Amid the swirling excitement of choosing venues, color palettes, and invitation designs, I started noticing slight changes in Ava, small divergences that pricked at my sense of security. It began with the phone. She'd been guarded with her text before, but in a normal, let-me-check-this-quickly sort of way. Now, she'd silence her notifications, keep her phone face down even if we were just watching TV. She'd slip away to take calls in the bathroom or linger in the hallway when a message arrived. I chalked it up to wedding stress or possible surprises she was planning for the ceremony. Ava liked orchestrating romantic gestures, so I convinced myself that was all it was. But the phone wasn't the only thing. She'd come home later than usual from work drinks, appearing distant and lost in thought. Our conversations grew stilted. One night, in the middle of a movie, she got a text that she refused to open in front of me. I teased her. "What? Planning my surprise bachelor party?" And she snapped at me, eyes flashing with guilt or panic. I wasn't sure which. She apologized 5 minutes later, but the sting remained. As the weeks went on, intimacy between us felt forced, as though she were playing a part in a script she hadn't rehearsed. She'd be affectionate 1 minute, then cold the next. To anyone else, the changes might have seemed trivial, but to me, they felt like hairline cracks creeping through one solid wall. One night, I confronted her. We were washing dishes, the soapy water between us turning gray. I asked if something was bothering her, if there was a reason she'd been so cagey. She brushed it off, claiming stress about wedding costs, about the floors in our new apartment that needed refinishing, about little life dramas. I offered to help, to lighten her load, but she just nodded and changed the subject. She always changed the subject. I still remember how the overhead kitchen light picked out the tired lines around her eyes, how her hands trembled slightly as she dried a plate. A pang of fear knotted in my stomach. It occurred to me that the future I'd envisioned with her might be on unsteady ground. I ignored that thought, wanting to give her the benefit of the doubt. After all, we'd shared half a decade of trust and love. Why let a few uneasy moments overshadow that? If it had only been minor secrecy and phone guarding, maybe I'd never have found out. Maybe I'd have dismissed the entire episode as nerves, a passing restlessness before our big day. But Ava lied to me about something important, something that forced me to confront the truth I was so desperately avoiding. It was a Saturday afternoon, roughly a month before our wedding date. She told me she was heading out to meet some old high school friends who were in town briefly. She said she'd be at a brunch place on 8th Street, that she'd be back home by early evening. As she left, I noticed she was wearing makeup far heavier than usual, a sleek black dress that I typically only saw her wear to wake events. Something felt off, but I swallowed my suspicions. A few hours later, I got a call from my friend Marcus, who happened to work near that same brunch spot. He said he'd gone by for lunch, but didn't see Ava or any sign of the friends she was supposed to be meeting. He'd also swung by a nearby cafe, scanning for her out of curiosity. Still no Ava. My mind raced. Maybe she'd shifted the location, or maybe the plan changed. But I felt compelled to check for myself. I hopped into my car, driven by an irrational mix of fear and adrenaline, searching the blocks near the alleged brunch place. I didn't see her anywhere. I tried calling her, straight to voicemail. I left a message, even though my mouth went dry as I spoke, my voice trembling. Half an hour into my frantic search, I spotted her car in a parking lot behind a small hotel I knew well. The sign out front boasted a quaint restaurant on its ground floor, a restaurant that, ironically, was nowhere near 8th Street or the brunch spot she'd mentioned. My heart thumped in my chest, a deep, sickening dread. It felt like I was watching a slow-motion scene unfold, powerless to turn it off. I parked out of sight, waiting, mind spinning with possible explanations. Maybe she had come here after brunch for some reason. Maybe a friend had insisted. But as the minutes ticked by, each possible excuse sounded more far-fetched. Nearly an hour later, I saw her emerge from the hotel's side entrance. She was laughing, talking closely with a man I recognized from a networking event we'd attended last year, Colin, an acquaintance from her volunteer circle. The way they leaned into each other, the casual brush of her hand across his jacket, told me everything. I didn't confront them. I couldn't move, paralyzed by a monstrous wave of heartbreak. Ava parted ways with him in the parking lot, giving him a long hug, a brief kiss on the cheek. Then she got into her car, oblivious to my presence, and drove away. I sat there in stunned silence, tears stinging my eyes. By the time I managed to drive home, she was already there, greeting me with a too cheery, "Hey, how was your day?" as if the entire world hadn't just collapsed beneath my feet. That night, after she fell asleep, I paced the living room, grappling with a swirl of anger and despair. A part of me wanted to shake her awake and scream accusations, demand an explanation. Another part wanted to slide into denial, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But I'm not the type to run on raw impulse. I needed to know how deep the betrayal went. The next few days, I played the role of the oblivious fiancé. I had no choice but to wait. Confronting her without proof might let her spin lies about how it was all a misunderstanding. So, I started my own quiet investigation, checking her phone bills, where I found an alarming frequency of text to a number I recognized as Colin's, glancing at her calendar for work dinners that I suspected were anything but. I rummaged through her desk drawers, and among old utility bills and half-written to-do lists, I found a small envelope containing receipt for a fancy restaurant I'd never heard her mention. The date coincided with one of her girls' nights. I felt my heart twisting with each new piece of evidence. It was clear this wasn't a one-time slip. She'd been orchestrating a double life for some time, weaving me into one routine and Colin into another. She'd likely planned to marry me while continuing an affair. The mere thought made me sick to my stomach. I debated confiding in someone, Marcus or my sister, Lana, but I couldn't face the pity I knew would follow. Instead, I took pictures of everything, the phone logs, the receipts, even screenshots of texts I managed to glean when she left the phone unlocked on the kitchen counter for a minute. I didn't have the guts to read them in detail, but I saw enough to confirm an emotional entanglement. In one message, she wrote, "I miss you so much." To him, the heartbreak was immeasurable, and anger flickered inside me like a pilot flame waiting to roar into a blaze. It was on a Wednesday evening, just 2 weeks before our scheduled wedding, that I finally sat her down. Tensions had been high, with me feigning normalcy while she carried on. But I couldn't hide it any longer. My chest felt like it would burst from the pressure of this secret knowledge. We were in the living room, the soft glow of a solitary floor lamp casting our shadows on the wall. She was flipping absently through a wedding magazine, though I doubted she was really reading anything. The ring on her finger, my mother's engagement ring, now reset for her, glimmered under the light, mocking me. "Ava," I said, voice strained, "we need to talk." She looked up, seeing the severity in my face. She set the magazine aside, exhaled. "Is something wrong?" "Yeah," I managed, my palm sweating. "I know about Colin. I know you've been seeing him behind my back." Her eyes widened with feigned confusion, or perhaps real shock that I'd discovered her secret. She started to deny it, but I cut her off, brandishing the phone records, the receipt, the texts. With each piece of evidence I laid out, the color drained from her face. The lie died on her lips. The silence stretched for an eternity. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling with an odd mix of anger and guilt. It just happened," she whispered. I felt suffocated with the wedding, the planning, the life we're about to lock ourselves into. I didn't mean for it to go so far. I glared at her, tears burning in my eyes. How long? 6 months, she admitted, gaze fixed on the floor. But it's not just physical. We connected. We talked about so many things. I love you, but I realized I might not be ready to settle down. I don't know, exploring. Exploring. I spat, voice cracking. We were engaged. You could have called it off if you were uncertain. You didn't have to do this. She reached for my hand, but I jerked away. I'm sorry, she pleaded. I was confused. But you have to believe me. I still want to marry you. Colin was a mistake. I studied her Tay Street face, feeling a raw mix of heartbreak and betrayal. She wanted me to believe the wedding could still happen, that we could whitewash these months of deceit and carry on. My chest tightened at the absurdity of that request. But I said nothing, uncertain how to respond to the most staggering betrayal I'd ever faced. For the next few days, we existed in a surreal limbo. Ava offered to cut off contact with Colin, to do whatever it took to fix things. She insisted the wedding didn't have to be cancelled, that no one needed to know. She'd break it off with him and vow never to stray again. She begged for a chance to prove she could change. I might have believed her if it had been a momentary lapse. But half a year? That was intentional, sustained deception. For me, love is built on trust. Once that's gone, there's no foundation. Still, I didn't hail her out of the apartment right away. A twisted part of me wanted her to sweat, to wonder if I'd blow up her life. She had dared to treat me like an option, as though I were a convenient safety net. My heartbreak started morphing into a quiet, seething anger. Soon, that anger sought an outlet. I found myself imagining scenarios where I confront her publicly, or where I'd sabotage her carefully curated image of compassion. But I also recognized that vengeance, if done hastily, might spiral out of control. So, I laid out a plan, methodical, cold, and cathartic. First, I spoke to the wedding vendors. I canceled everything behind her back, the venue, the caterer, the florist. I might forfeit deposits, but it was worth it to unburden myself from a sham ceremony. I made sure none of them would contact her, explaining a personal emergency and directing them to speak only with me. They agreed, albeit with confusion or mild disappointment. Second, I compiled every shred of evidence about her affair. My phone bill PDFs, photos of her with Colin, screenshots of her messages. I stored them in a password-protected folder on my laptop and a backup flash drive. If the day came where she tried to shift blame or spin the story to her advantage, I'd be ready. Third, I booked a meeting with a lawyer. We were only engaged, which meant no legal ties yet, but I needed advice on how to handle our shared lease, our finances, and my own protection in case she decided to retaliate. The lawyer commended me on being proactive, especially since we'd never merged bank accounts or officially tied the knot. By the time I finished these tasks, I felt calmer, like I was orchestrating my exit from a toxic arrangement. Ava hovered around me at home, uncertain how to talk to me. She must have known something was brewing behind my distant stays and minimal words, but she was too wrapped in guilt to pry. Or maybe she was petrified that if she pressed too hard, I'd end everything on the spot. The wedding was set for a Saturday in late autumn at a historic greenhouse. The final Sunday before the big day, I pulled the trigger on my plan. Without warning, I called up her parents, Miriam and Frank, who adored me, or used to, anyway, and told them the wedding was off. I informed them it was best they speak to Ava for the full story. Then I texted some of our closest friends, the ones who were supposed to be in our small wedding party, inviting them over to the apartment in the afternoon. I said it concerned the wedding, and I had urgent news. Suspicion hung in the air, but they all agreed to show up. Ava, who was out running errands, had no idea. By the time she got home, about 10 people milled around our living room. My sister, my best man, her maid of honor, and a few other close friends. The tension was palpable. I stood at the front of the room, my laptop in hand. She froze in the doorway, color draining from her face. I didn't mince words. Everyone, I'm sorry to do this, but there's something you need to know. The wedding is canceled. A flurry of gasps. Ava sputtered, "What are you doing?" I continued, voice unwavering. For months, Ava has been having an affair with Colin. They've lied to me, lied to all of us. I decided not to marry someone who betrays me. A stunned silence took hold, broken only by my sister's whispered, "Oh my God." Ava's eyes brimmed with tears, but I pressed on, launching into a brief summary of how I found out, how she tried to keep it hidden. I kept it factual, devoid of melodrama, but the weight of the revelation was crushing. She attempted to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. Afterward, I played a short slideshow of relevant screenshots, tasteful in the sense that I didn't show graphic details, only evidence of the affair. I wanted no one leaving that room doubting me. People started shooting Ava looks of anger or pity. She sank into a chair, tears falling silently. The hush in the room felt suffocating. Finally, I snapped the laptop shut. I'm sorry for bringing you all here like this, but you've put time and money into supporting our wedding. I thought you deserved the truth directly. If you have any questions, ask Ava. I'll be moving out soon. With that, I turned to her. We're done. She let out a choked sob, standing up so quickly the chair screeched across the floor. Her words tumbled out in a fractured apology. Leo, I'm sorry. I never meant. But I couldn't bear to hear the rest. I walked into the hallway, grabbed the bag I packed, and left without looking back. My sister followed me, tears in her eyes, but she squeezed my shoulder with quiet solidarity. Behind me, I heard Ava's voice break into guttural sobs, while the stunned circle of friends tried to piece together a response. I stayed at a friend's place for a few nights, phone buzzing with messages from mutual friends trying to understand what had happened. Most expressed shock or sympathy, some praising me for having the strength to walk away. Others asked if I was okay. The short answer was no, I wasn't. My chest felt hollow. I had unraveled a life I spent years building, and no matter how justified I was, it still hurt. The heartbreak didn't vanish simply because I'd taken decisive action. Ava texted me a dozen times a day. Please for another chance, angry rant about how I'd humiliated her in front of everyone, heartbreak-laden voicemails. I responded with a single text, we have nothing more to discuss. I'll coordinate with the landlord about removing my name from the lease. Please don't contact me. Then I blocked her number. Bit by bit, I took steps to rebuild my life. I found a new apartment on the other side of town, closer to the high school where I'd started teaching English. I sold the engagement ring, painful, but necessary, and used the money to pay off some of the non-refundable wedding deposits. I visited my sister's place often, letting her comfort me with home-cooked meals and Netflix marathons. I tried not to dwell on thoughts of Ava with Colin, or how they might proceed now that I was gone. Some nights, the images of them together would flood my mind, igniting waves of anger or sorrow. Therapy helped. I booked sessions with a counselor who guided me to process the betrayal without drowning in it. Over time, my heartbreak receded into a dull ache, overshadowed by a cautious optimism that I could start anew. 3 months passed in a blur. Winter receded into the earliest buds of spring. My once fiancée was reduced to a memory, albeit a sharp-edged one that occasionally tugged at my heart. I heard through mutual friends that she moved out of the apartment, too, transferring her volunteer position to another shelter. Colin, apparently, ghosted her soon after the fiasco. Whether that rumor was true, I never bothered to verify. Maybe they tried to make it work. Maybe they parted ways. Either outcome didn't concern me. I'd done my part to close the door on a relationship built on deception. I also heard a mixture of responses to my public reveal. Some people praised it as a bold stand against betrayal. Others thought I was merciless for humiliating her so directly. But what they thought scarcely mattered. I had done what I believed was necessary for my own peace of mind. I didn't want to hide or let her control the narrative. She stole my sense of security, so I took control of the truth. On a bright Saturday, nearly half a year after I'd left, I found myself walking alone through the old neighborhood near campus where Ava and I first met. I was there to see Marcus, who'd invited me to a small barbecue. On a whim, I decided to pass by the coffee shop of our first meeting. The windows still displayed chalk-written menus, and inside, a handful of customers sipped lattes. I paused, memories crashing over me, Ava's apologetic grin, that little piece of paper with a number, the swirl of promise I'd felt in my chest. My throat tightened for a moment, but then I took a deep breath, stepped inside, and ordered a coffee. The place smelled of espresso and cinnamon. As I stood waiting, I realized something surprising. I wasn't drowning in sorrow or regret. I was nostalgic, sure, but also quietly hopeful. Life had a peculiar way of stitching together heartbreak and growth, forging new paths with the debris of old illusions. When the barista handed me my coffee, I found a seat by the window. I watched the passers-by and felt a strange calm wash over me. I no longer pictured an ideal future with Ava. I pictured my own future, untethered to the weight of a betrayal. It was a slower, more measured sense of hope, but it was mine, and that, I realized, was enough. What did you think of the story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for listening.